How's it going, my awesome bunch of bakers? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're making perhaps my favorite bread of all time. I grew up eating this kind of bread, so let's go to the kitchen and get started. Some of you may recall the Belarusian rye bread recipe that I posted many moons ago. That is one of my favorite recipes on the whole channel. Like I said, I grew up eating this kind of bread. If I could only choose one kind of bread to eat for the rest of my life, this would probably be it. It has a soft and bouncy texture, it packs a punch of flavor, it stays fresh for longer than other breads, and it complements any savoury topping they could throw at it. And it's perfectly fine with just a little bit of butter and a pinch of sea salt. The previous recipe I posted involved a little bit more work than this one. I have simplified the process here and improved the flavour. Instead of a pre-ferment, we are using the cold bulk fermentation method in this recipe. And we are baking it in a tin, so there's no need to worry about shaping. So even if you're a beginner, you can make this. This recipe is split up in two parts, the main dough and the scald. For the main dough, we'll need some rye flour, some white bread flour, water, yeast, salt and some kind of sweet syrup. I'm using barley malt syrup. For the scald, we'll need some more rye flour, some mashed potato, boiling water, caraway seeds, and the essential magic ingredient, fermented rye malt powder. Without this, the bread is not the same. This stuff is not easy to source. I usually get it off eBay. It comes from Belarus, Ukraine or Russia. It takes weeks to arrive, but it's worth the wait. This is what it looks like. This is the one I always use. Perhaps you can source this ingredient locally, but I've never seen it in a shop before. I would suggest you search for fermented rye malt powder on eBay and look for this packaging. Okay, onto the equipment. We'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, a brush and a whisk. I'm gonna use a chopstick to poke holes in the dough. They serve two purposes. One is that they can prevent it from tearing open at a random place, and the second is that it will give it that classic Eastern European rye bread look. I'm gonna bake this loaf in a 2 pound or 900 gram tin, but it will fit perfectly well in a 1.5 pound tin too. We will need some way for applying water to the loaf. You can use a spray bottle like this, or you can use a brush. That will be also an essential step, so don't skip it. Okay, let's begin by making the scald. In a large bowl, combine the caraway seeds, the rye flour, the fermented rye malt, the mashed potato, and the boiling water. This scalding step serves two purposes. For one, it will intensify the flavor of the rye malt and the caraway seeds, and the rye flour. But secondly, it will give the bread that bouncy soft texture, and the mashed potato will give it extra softness on top of that. If you want to learn more about scalding and the use of potatoes in bread making, check out the Principles of Baking playlist. Okay, we need to cover this and leave it to cool down for around 2 hours. And you may have noticed that I smeared the scald on the sides of the bowl. This is to help it cool down sooner. You could also make this a day ahead of time and pop it in the fridge. So it's been a couple of hours, I've mixed it up, let's check the temperature. 26 degrees Celsius, that's about 79 Fahrenheit. My kitchen is around 23, that's about 73 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to use slightly cooler water to ensure that my dough doesn't get too warm. We are aiming for a final dough temperature of around 24 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is 75 to 77 Fahrenheit. Now we can start mixing the final dough. To the scald, add the water, the salt, the yeast, the barley malt syrup, or whichever sweet syrup that you like. Mix everything well. A whisk actually does a great job at this. Next up, add the white bread flour and then mix again. Because this is a no-knead bread, it's important to mix ingredients in stages. We must ensure that everything's dispersed evenly. After you've incorporated the white bread flour, add the final ingredient, the remaining rye flour. I'm using whole grain rye flour, or dark rye flour as it's known, but you can certainly use white rye flour instead. It would be a good idea to mix this in a slightly larger bowl. The scraper wasn't doing the job here, so I had to finish the mix by hand. If you're going to do this, wet your hand with water, it makes life a little bit easier. But no matter if you use your scraper or your hands, just mix until there's no dry flour left. Okay, let's pop this in a clean bowl and take its temperature. 24 to 25 degrees Celsius is what we were aiming for, and that's exactly what we got. Now we can cover the dough and pop it in the fridge for 30 minutes. This is just the initial cool down stage. After 30 minutes, we'll remove the dough from the fridge and give it a fold. Folding serves two purposes. It will help cool down the dough quicker, because as we fold the cool outside part into the middle, we equalize the temperature. And secondly, it will build a little bit of gluten strength. As we are not kneading, we need to do something. So dust your dough with flour, tip it out on the table, flatten it, fold the edge over the middle, go around in a circle until you reach point where you started, then flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table. That's the fold done, back in the bowl it goes. Cover it up and pop it back into the fridge for 24 hours of cold bulk fermentation. This will make it taste amazing. Now it's the next day, let's look at this dough. It has puffed up, it has fermented beautifully. Now it's ready for the final shaping and then the final proof. But before we can do that, let's quickly prep the baking tin. Rub it with a bit of butter to prevent any stickage. If you don't want to use butter, use a vegetable fat or some oil. Another unique thing about this bread is that it's glazed with a glaze which is made from the dough itself. So dust your dough generously with flour, pop it out on the table and then remove 20 grams of it. Place that little piece of dough in a bowl and then add 20 grams of water to it. Whisk it until it's smooth, and that's how you make the glaze. And you can use this method for any rye bread that you're making. It may not work as well with wheat flour since there's gluten. Okay, let's shape this bad boy. Dust your dough with flour, flatten it out, and then just roll it up into a log. This dough is quite sticky, so don't worry about dusting it a little bit more generously than usually. And just roll it up lightly, don't shape it too tight because it will tear. Now move the loaf to the greased tin and then press it down to fit the shape. It will of course spread out and fill the tin as it ferments, but I still like to press it in place. Okay, once that's done, let's clean down the mess. Okay, our loaf is ready for the final proof. Of course you want to cover it so it doesn't dry out. Just for reference, my kitchen is around 25 degrees Celsius at the moment, which is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So the final proof took around an hour and a half to 2 hours. If your kitchen is warmer, it will take you less time. If it's cooler, it will take longer. During the final hour of fermentation, preheat the oven, 200 degrees Celsius, fan off, and that's 392 Fahrenheit. You'll know when the bread is ready for the oven as soon as you see the first crack appearing on top of it. In fact, I could have let this ferment a little bit less, because the crack is a little bit too big already. But of course it makes no difference, it will still taste the same. Okay, whisk the paste one more time before applying it, just to ensure that it's nice and smooth. And now just brush it all over the loaf. Now there's just one more thing to do before we bake. Poke a load of holes in it. I find that dipping the chopstick in the water sometimes helps a bit, although it's not totally necessary. Now I poked a load of holes in this loaf. You don't have to do that many. I just like the look is all. Okay, this bad boy's ready for the oven. So let's pop it in there, leave it to bake for 55 minutes. Now that's a beautiful rye bread, but it's not ready yet. There's one little quick step to go, and it really enhances the whole thing. This is where the water spray bottle comes in. Take the loaf out the tin, place it on a rack, and then just soak it on all sides. You want the whole bread to be wet. If you don't have a spray bottle, just use a brush. Now place the loaf back into the oven for 5 more minutes of baking. And now it's done. The water makes the crust beautifully soft, and it gives it a nice shine too. And there you have it. That's how you make a nice Eastern European style rye bread. One of my favorite breads ever. I could eat this every single day. If you like dark breads, whole grain breads, rye breads, you will love this thing. Just look at how bouncy it is. I can't get over this texture. If you're interested in multigrain recipes, you can find a whole playlist of them on the channel. And if you want to learn more about cold fermentation, you'll find a video about that in the Principles of Baking playlist. And plenty of recipes in the cold bulk fermentation playlist. I mean, you can pretty much find anything on this channel. And if I may ask one thing of you, click that thumbs up button. It really helps me out. So what do you think of this recipe? What's your favorite Eastern European or European rye bread? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.